Welcome to the BVTV Network, coming to you from the UK studios of BizVision. I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. This is episode 3 in the BVTV Save Your Asks Trilogy with author Chris Tuff. Hello, Chris, for the final time.
Let's do it. I'm excited.
This is, I said final time. I didn't mean final time. This is just final time in this trilogy. Yeah,
of course.
Can we wallow around in the lower leagues, and many of us do, and many are just content to do so. But I think, armed with the skills that you're imparting, surely it makes sense to aim higher. How should someone go about doing that?
One of the more I think easy to grasp tactics that I talk about, Malcolm, is the importance of experiences. And I think within our business walls, we've been trained that you go to nice dinners, right? Like if you're going for what I would call like the big dogs, you're going to take them to like the nicest dinner. You might invite them to a sporting event, whatever it is. I tend to flip that model in that we should capitalize on one, understanding where that race to the middle. So where's that common connection between you and that other person? For example, I've made some of the best business relationships while kiteboarding. When I find these other business leaders, when you have that bond and you kiteboard next to each other, it creates a bond. But the most ridiculous story that I talk about in the new book is how I tell the story of every year my firm gets 18 passes to the Masters in Augusta, which unto itself is a pretty good ticket, right?
Yeah.
But we like to up the ante, where not only do we take prospects to the Masters, but I rent 2 yellow helicopters and we helicopter into the Masters. And here are these guys on their G5s looking at who are the guys in the yellow helicopters. And what's kind of crazy to think is that it's like $1,000 a person, right, to take the helicopters, but it's the most ridiculous way to arrive at Augusta. And what happens in the helicopter, especially on the way home after people have imbibed in a few beers, is it becomes this amazing adventure. And, that's one of those more extreme pieces that I use. But, the other side of that same spectrum is what I call Shawshanking. And Shawshanking is one of my favorite verbs in the new terminology of the book, which is this idea around relationships are created through lots of little touch points. It's not before you get to that Augusta national helicopter trip, you're probably going to have about 20 lighter interactions with that person. And social media is one of the best places to participate in that. And it was actually in 2012, I was signing the biggest deal of my life as the buyer. And I turned to the entrepreneur who we had met 7 years prior in a closed Facebook group, right as Facebook was coming about. And I said, Jason, how in the world did you get me? I'm all over the place. And here we are 7 years later. How'd you do it? He goes, Chris, you really want to know? I was like, yes. He goes, I Shawshanked you. Every single week, I've had a touch point with you. Just like in Shawshank Redemption, in order for him to fund the library, Andy Dufresne wrote a letter a week. And it was 2 years in that he got his first check. And it was 10 years later that he had the nicest library in the prison system. I Shawshanked you, Chris. I never went in for an ask. I just used Facebook, Instagram, text message to develop this relationship. And I said, Jason, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. I'm going to make a verb a part of my own. I was head of the sales for the agency, and one of the biggest companies in the US had reached out to me. I said, I'm going to go do that same thing with them. And so I was kind of flippant in my response to them, because their email from the head of marketing was, hey, Chris, we'd love to talk to you about a position to lead digital and social media for us. And I was like, I'd love to work with you, ... as your agency partner. And I was like, I'm just going to call her and I'm going to Shawshank them. And so I call her and I was like, listen, let me just come down there and let me help you hire the right person. I don't need anything in return. And I did that. And then I did another meeting. And then I did a whole learning session for 1,000 of their employees, all for free. And it was 14 months later that we got our first contract with that company. If you fast forward to today, Malcolm, we have 90 people on that account. And it's one of our largest accounts in the agency. This idea of Shawshanking works, especially with those super important contacts that you're trying to go after.
Yes, I quite agree, Chris, because in many ways, that's what we are doing with our BVTV network. With these 666 people, including, of course, the world famous Chris Tuff. But I've been up with the VPs, the CEOs of people. I would spend years knocking on the door. And it's all because of the connections that we built up between that alumni, should we say, of our BVTV guests. And also because we don't ask, as you say, we give to get.
Exactly. And Malcolm, you and I, this is an experience, right? Just like taking helicopters to the Masters or going for a mountain bike ride, if that's your thing. This is an experience that we will always share. And when you pop into my feed going forward, I will remember this, right? And it will stand out. And it is one of the top 1% of any of my interactions because you're hitting me in the place that I want to talk about, my passions, right? What a beautiful thing. And, you know, you look at podcasters, right? I mean, and I have a lot of people saying, hey, Chris, should I start a podcast? Like, you know, I hear the average amount of listeners is like 20 people. I'm like, that's not why it's important. Why it's important is because you actually have something that can create a shared connection between you two. And when you ask people to be on your podcast, they're going to say yes, because ultimately people want to share what they have to say. And
the art though, is listening to what people are saying, isn't it? And that's what I find, that a lot of people, when they're doing their supposed networking, they're not connecting because they're not listening.
They're talking or they're going in for asks. That's exactly right. And once again, going back to one of my favorite quotes from the book, curiosity is the difference between connecting and networking. You've got to be genuinely curious about that other person. And the other C that I talk a lot about is the importance of confidence, right? Knowing who it is you are, what is your currency, what do you have to offer, and then doubling down on that as you create that genuine connection, which usually comes, to your point, in the form of asking lots of questions about them.
Yeah. And I also find that's the exciting thing, because I know all about me, so why don't I want to know all about them? No.
Exactly.
Thanks, Chris. Now let's give viewers and listeners details of your URL, your website address, which for the final time, and it's a simple one you see behind me, viewers, and for listeners, it's all the W's dot Chris, spelled CHRIS, Tuff, TUFF, ChrisTuff.me. Chris's book is called Save Your Asks, Evolve Your Networking Currencies, Grow Your Influence, Triple Your Business, and it's published by Panther Press. Now, I said at the start of this trilogy that I rushed to say yes to my guest today, Chris Tuff. I love his approach to businesses. It's today's thinking, and I love his book, Save Your Asks. So, nothing else to say apart from thanks, Chris. Get the book.
Thank you, Malcolm. It was awesome.